Now, for a broader look at China-US trade, as well as the 100-day action plan between the two countries, I'm joined by Sara Hsu, an associate professor of economics at the State University of New York at New Paltz. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rachelle.
Now, we've already seen the early results of the US-China 100-day action plan, including lifting the beef exports ban. What else could be in the works for the remaining days of the plan?
Right. So there are various items that are still on the agenda. Certainly, the U.S. is still in the process of putting together some new rules for imports of Chinese poultry, and in exchange, China is going to start licensing for American credit investigation firms and electronic payment firms. And these are going to occur by July 16th, among various other items.
Now, one of the issues we saw lots of talk about the U.S. trade deficit with China. How, if at all, has the rhetoric of the Trump administration changed on this?
Well, it's changed really dramatically. President Trump went from discussing a potential 45% tariff on Chinese imports on the campaign trail and also labeling China a currency manipulator to agreeing to this 100-day deal, which basically puts additional deadlines. It speeds up the deadlines for items that were already on the agenda. So relatively a small victory. And so it's pretty much a 180.
And why do you think we saw this shift?
Most likely there was some convincing that was carried out by his senior advisors, particularly his son-in-law and his daughter. Also, the potential threat of North Korea might have convinced Trump to alter his stance on China, which has a lot of influence on North Korea.
Now, let's look at how they actually got to this point with the trade imbalance. And overall, how much does this matter to their economic relationship?
So we got to this trade imbalance because Americans like to go shopping. We like to purchase goods, and a lot of those goods are made in China because they're relatively cheaper than goods from elsewhere. It's not necessarily problematic as long as other countries are willing to hold American debt in the form of treasuries or other types of bills. And so as long as America is credible as a nation politically and economically, as long as it's a global superpower, there's really no problem with the trade deficit.
Now, the U.S. raised a number of issues outside of the trade deficit, including intellectual property, market access, and the UN rate exchange. What do you see, though, as the primary concerns from the U.S. side?
Probably from the Trump administration's standpoint, President Trump has taken the view that deficits are not a good thing, and to answer that, China has agreed to import more goods from the United States. But from the perspective of American firms, probably there's more of a concern about market access, limited competition for foreign firms in China, as well as the slowing pace of reforms seemingly and slowing growth.
Now, from the Chinese side, what is it that they would like to see happen?
From the Chinese side, I think that there's concern about things like anti-dumping tariffs that were imposed on Chinese steel exports in the United States last year, as well as the export controls from the United States on high technology goods. And this has been loosening up to some extent over time. We've seen that the Americans have been more willing to export goods like that focus on communications, more recently on aircraft technology, but there's still some more tightly held technologies, including infrared detection services and crime control technologies.
Now, we also looked at this issue of export control, fair treatment of Chinese investments, which have seen a lot more scrutiny, and as well as these trade remedy measures, as you mentioned, when it comes to anti-dumping. So how much momentum have we seen from the U.S. so far, and how much more can we expect?
There has been, it seems that there is a bit of room for more agreement between the Chinese and the U.S. It looks like there's more room for negotiation, given the 100-day agreement That's a relatively positive development for the Trump administration. For these other items, such as export controls, it may take a little bit longer for these to loosen up a little bit.
Well, certainly at least progress there. Thank you so much, Sara Hsu, Associate Economics Professor at the State University of New York at New Paltz.